Hello. I'm gonna go quickly over the damage formula in Diablo 4. People seem to not really understand because it's a little tricky, but it's really not that tricky. Um, this is a pretty simplified version. Basically, it takes your intelligence, multiplies it by your base damage per second, multiplies it by your skill percentage, then multiplies it by all your additives, then this isn't damage per hit, but this is like a damage per second formula. So then you multiply it by your attack speed boost, because how many attacks you're getting out per second, and then you multiply it by all your multiplicative glyph bonuses from your aspects, your legendary nodes, and your glyphs. Um, and then I'm just going to touch this really briefly. I'm going to ignore overpower for sorcerer because we don't really do overpower, but I think pretty sure overpower is still in its own bucket. So this used to have crit and vuln as extra buckets, but they have since been moved into their like crit damage and vulnerable damage have been moved into the additive bucket. And basically what happens now is if you look over here in the multis in this purple section, if it's a crit, it's times 1.5. If they're vulnerable, your damage is times 1.2. So they've essentially just become multis. Uh, the same as like conceded in Storm Swell. So if you get a crit, times 1.5. And the reason why Hodo barbs are so broken right now is because the overpower values are so inflated that they can get upwards of like 2,000, 2,200 overpower. And then if we look, it's like times 21 damage. So that's why they're getting in these crazy high millions and stuff because like all these this isn't every multi that like a source will have, but this is just like a grab bag of it. You're probably looking at more like 13 or 15 total multis once you factor in all your glyphs and stuff. Um, so it's like they're getting all these free multis, like every single multi that we get, they have, and then they're also getting these overpower multis, which is like times another 21, so it just balloons so crazy. But Source doesn't have good forms of overpower, so it's not worth stacking into because we don't have glyphs, legendary nodes, etc., that can like give us a guaranteed overpower. You basically rely on banished lords. It's like every 300 mana spent, you would get an overpower, and it's just like, oh, every 10th or 11th cast, I'll get one. It ends up just not being worth it. So, intelligence. The way you can look at intelligence is in the formula. It is 1 plus your intelligence divided by 1,000. So, basically, the rule of thumb for intelligence is for every 100 intelligence, you get a 5% uh, damage increase. So, that's because, say you have, most sorcerers have around 800, 900, 1,000 intelligence. So say you're going from 800 to 900 intelligence, it's a 5.56% increase. Um, yeah, most of my builds are around 900 or so. And then we can look at our base DPS. That's right here. You can see the 2,029 damage per second. You have two of them, so you double it, 4,058. And then staff is 4,057. Staffs were really meta in preseason, and this was because of the old damage buckets. Like if you wanted max damage, you needed a staff. It's because the old damage buckets, you would roll, like you'd get a really high amount of intelligence from it, and then you would roll vulnerable and crit damage. And because they were their own multiplicative buckets in the past, getting 52, getting 64% crit damage or something was like really valuable as opposed to 30 because it was, you were going from say 230% crit to 270% crit. It was like a 20% damage increase. So, but as of now, the meta is back to one hand is like dagger wand slash focus because of the cooldown and stuff that you get. The staffs just unless you're running like a unique staff like staff of Lamesson or Avarian, they're just not worth running because of how much cooldown reduction you lose from the focus. Like you can roll crit, resource gen. You get so much quality of life from the focus that it's not worth running the staffs. Until they change staffs, they're dead in the water. Like they would need to make this 52.5% damage to crowd controlled enemies like 150% or 200% for them to be worth it, in my opinion, because of all of the utility and cooldown that you lose from running it. Because right now they're about even. Even though you get double additives on here, like you'll get 180 in and you'll get all that. Like they are more damage because you get double values on all of the int, damage to close, damage to mastery. But you lose so much utility from it that the extra damage isn't worth it. Um, and then another thing to note is like every 25 item power. So like say you get say you this 925 IP. This is a 900 IP weapon upgraded 5 times, so 925. And then as we can see, as we go from 925 to 950, we get a 10% increase in damage. So you can think of every 25, and this is all endgame. Every 25 item power is 10% more damage. Next, we look at our skill modifier ranking, and because I'm filming this in season 2, we're going to talk about ball lightning. Ball lightning, it starts at 66%. As we can see here, this is 12 ranks, 126%. Every one rank in the skill is 6% added to it. And the way it works in the formula is, say you have 16 ranks, that skill percentage is 150%. So that means you are doing 1.5 times damage. Like in the formula, it's times 1.5. Then if you have one rank, it's 60%, so it's times 0.6. So as you go up in ranks, you're adding 6% to this value. And you do get diminishing returns because going from 60 to 78, it's 30% more. Like 78 minus 60 divided by 60, it's 30% more. But then as you get higher, you can see that it starts to go down. 4 to 7 is 23, 7 to 10 is 18, 10 to 13 is 16, 13 to 16 is like 13 and a half. So that's why like if you have a Harlequin crest, so you have your 5 ranks from putting the points into the skill. Then if you have pants with 4 ranks ball lightning, that's another 4. That takes you to 9. And then if you have a Harlequin crest Shaco, that's another 4. That takes you to 13. That's why like the 3 ranks to mastery skill on the amulet is sort of like the flex spot. Because most amulets want movement speed, mana cost reduction, and then usually a passive like 3 ranks to devouring blaze. Because you get more value out of that. So that's why the mastery ranks is typically the flex spot. Flex spot. Like if you need DR injured or call it, or like total armor, that's usually the first to go because going from 13 to 16 ranks is only 13% more damage. Next, we look into our additives. So as we can see, if you say you make a build max roll or something, it gives you this huge list of additives. The first thing I'm going to say is when you look at critical strike damage, 388.3%, that's inflated because the game's tooltip just like takes your crit damage and multiplies it by 1.5. It's just a really weird tooltip. The same thing happens in the game, so you just hover over it, and then it'll tell you what your actual crit damage additive is. And like for here, we can see it's 225.5. And then same thing with vulnerable. One second. Right here, so we have 60 from the Paragon. That's the number you need to look at. But besides that, basically the formula is 1 plus your additives. So say you have 900% worth of additives, its value is 10 in the formula. So like additives are technically multis, as you can see here. Say you go from 800 to 900 additive, you're doing 12.5% more damage. So 100 additive is worth a 12.5 multi, going from 800 to 900. 900 to 1000, we can see it's 11.1. 1000 to 1100, it's 10%. There are diminishing returns, but they're not as severe as the skill modifier. Diminishing returns. They're about on par with like the intelligence diminishing returns. So typically you just kind of, if you don't have anything to throw in that slot, just throw it. So like your base, because of the one in the formula. Sorry, I'm not trying to confuse you. So your base is like 100%, and then you say you have 300% lightning damage, 24% damage from elites, 118 close. Just ignore crackling energy. It does like no damage. Just ignore it. Damage with mastery, 138. Um, and your critical strike damage, your vulnerable damage, all that gets added into a big formula, and then it comes out. So we end up usually most builds around 900% additive, 1,000 stuff like that. So you're looking at like a multi of 10. Then we go into our attack speed. So one more touch on this is that's why people say like additives have diminishing returns, because like if you look at a dagger, it's got 30% damage to close. People are always like, should I use a wand? Should I use a dagger? And it's like, at this level of additive, around 900%, so it's like at a value of 1,000. 1 plus 900% is 1,000. So adding another 30% damage to close is 3% damage. So it's not that big of a deal whether you have a dagger or a wand. Like I would take a god rolled wand over like a 2 out of 4 or 3 out of 4 dagger, just because it's not that big of a deal. If you don't have the dagger for like melee builds and stuff, you can make use of the lucky hit chance. It's fine. Then we go into attack speed boost. I'm not going to get into the buckets. Uh, there's like 2 attack speed buckets, and then there's like ones that ignore everything. Like unstable currents, that 25% attack speed. That's just like its own thing. Doesn't care what the other buckets are at. But like sorcerer, can sorcerer has a really hard time getting the second bucket, so we can basically just say like sorcerer can get to like 100% attack speed. So your base value, 1. You have 1 attack speed. Just ignore like the 1.2 hits per second, all that. So say you get 20% attack speed. You're doing 20% more damage because you're attacking 20% faster. But then as you get more attack speed, here's what we see, the diminishing returns, because you're going from 1.4 to 1.6, 1.6 to 1.8. It's all relative to what you had before you added additional stuff in. So um, you can get attack speed. Like right now we have Ravenous. So Ravenous plus like Asu's boots because of the extra movement speed, and then like your gloves takes you to like 95%. So you're like capped out on Source's main bucket of attack speed. Um, only like rogues and druids can get the other bucket. But so next season, what you will see on a lot of ball lightning builds is, because we're going to lose Ravenous, because accelerating doesn't work for ball lightning. It just like doesn't increase its tick rate. Even if you like hit somebody with a chain lightning and increase your attack speed, it just like doesn't work with it. I think it's bugged. You'll see a lot of Asu's ferocity, and then we have this 50% increase that'll let us hit the 41% tick rate. We need 41% attack speed um, to max the tick rate of ball lightning right now. So you can get it on your gloves. There's a little bit in the Paragon for like core skills or other skills. You can get it from the accelerating aspect. When you crit with a core skill, 25%, or this Asu's ferocity. You won't get any of the bonuses from Asu's, like the fire crit damage and stuff. Say you're running it on ball lightning, but if you kill an enemy with a crit or you hit a boss, you will proc both passives from it. You don't get them, but you'll activate this aspect right here that'll give you 50% attack speed. So yeah, there's diminishing returns. So, but like you want to get some good attack speed. It's usually just most builds will run. You roll it on your gloves always, unless you're using like incinerate or something. You roll it on your gloves, and then if you can, you take accelerating. There's also staff. Spear of Lycander gives you attack speed, and I think Andariel's helmet, the poison helmet, gives you attack speed. But there is diminishing returns, so like 15% attack speed isn't 15% damage. It starts to fall off a little bit. And then the last bucket is multis. Everyone's always like, additives are bad, multis are good. And as I was explaining earlier, additives are multis. They're just a little more, it's more of a runaround way, because you have to look at, if I'm going from 1,000 to 1,100 multi, 1,000 to 1,100 additive, that's 10% more, so that's a 10% multi. But this isn't all of them. I just like, if you get a crit times 1.5 damage, are they vulnerable times 1.2? And then you can look at multis come from aspects, legendary nodes, and glyphs. So like we have conceded 25% more damage times 1.25. Glyph charged, picking up crackling energy, 5% increased damage for 5 seconds, up to 15%. X 1.15. Frigid Fate, the legendary node. Deal bonus damage to vulnerable equal 10% of your total damage with cold. Mine's at 28%, so X 1.28. And then you end up just multiplying all those together. X 1.5, 1.2, 1.3. Go down the list, and then I don't have all of them included. This will typically end up being around 13, 15, something like that. If I factor them all in with all the glyphs, it starts this really snowball. So I like multis are really important, just because yeah, it starts to snowball. It's just like times this, times that, and the number starts to get really bigger. That's what, yeah, like as I was saying earlier, that's why the overpower for barbs is so broken right now, because it's like its own multi and its own little bucket. So it's like they have all this that we have, this huge spreadsheet, and then they're like, times 30 damage. So it's like that's why they're getting in the billions and stuff, and like clearing Abattoir of Zero way better than Source. But just to recap, so it's you have your intelligence, you have your weapon damage. Your intelligence scales about 5% for every 100 int. You have your weapon damage. Your weapon damage scales by about 10% for every 25 item power. You have your skill modifier percentage. So like all things included, you can just kind of take it at face value. Like depending on how much your skill percentage jumps, but for like ball lightning, you're looking normally at around 9 to 12. So like an extra 3 ranks is around 15% damage. Once it starts getting higher, 15 to like 24% damage. It's pretty close. Then your additives, the way you can think of it is at endgame, 100 additive is worth 10% damage. Like right here, we can think, 100 additives worth like 10 to 15% damage. Attack speed, slight diminishing returns, but it's almost a one for one, because we'll typically sit around 20, 40, 50% attack speed. So like another 20 attack speed is 15%. That's sort of the rule of thumb. Every 20 attack speeds, 15% more damage. And then multis are just straight up multis. Just takes all your damage, multiplies it by a number. You got another multi, multiply it again. Got another multi, multiply it again. So it just starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But additives are important, because this is a bucket. And if this bucket, say this bucket's only like 600, say you're going from like 600 to say your additives are so low they're only 500. And if you can get your additives up to 1,000, that's a 2 times multi. That's pretty big. That would take like 3 of these other smaller multis multiplied by each other, like 1.3 cubed is, yeah, 2.2. So you would need like 3 multis of like 30% to make up 500 additive. So yeah, this is the damage formula. Don't skip on your additives. Get your skill percentages up, but past like 12, past like 13 ranks, doesn't really matter that much. And then, yeah, 920, 925 IP items do matter. But if you got a god roll, if you have a god roll 900 item power dagger, you upgrade it up to